Welcome to the Uncredible Podcast. My name's Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. Today's episode is kind of funny. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was just about to go on my first run of the week. It's been a long week. I'll get to that when I do the weekly update. You can hear I've been battling a little bit of a cold, and I had filled up my water, got it all. I had the water vest on. I had made clear decisions on what I was going to do. I was getting my fueling ready, had the water vest on, and I had my earbuds in, which I always do. But I hadn't turned the music on, and I heard like a light buzz, and I was like, what? Like, what is that noise? And I was like, is that rain? So I pull the earbud out, and sure enough, it absolutely downpoured. I knew it was going to rain today. I kind of adjusted my schedule today. Normally I would switch from my night shift process and then, just stay up all day today. I slept all day, and I'm going to keep my third shift schedule where I just stay up all night. And I thought it was a perfect time to kick out a run. And it's my first run of the week, which, like I said, I'll get to in a minute. But the rain was just pouring down. So I said, you know what? Maybe I should just go downstairs and get this podcast recorded. So we're a little late in recording, but editing-wise, it should land at about the same time for you guys. So let's first jump into the Substack and look at what articles we had this week and what's coming up next week. Our first article this week was called Becoming the Jerk. This is a good article. It's really just about setting boundaries. And it's funny. It's kind of a constant thing where sometimes you relax those boundaries, and you're reminded of why you put them in the first place. But I share a couple of stories about just those people in your life that have a tendency to take and take and take and take. I think it's kind of a social thing for them. So they don't realize they're doing it. I think it's like, hey, can you come help me with this? For them, they want someone to be there. They think everyone's having a good time. But for the person helping, sometimes that person is like, dude, I got my own stuff to do. I got my own things to take care of. And that person, right, that's the person I tend to be, it's like, not only do I have my own stuff to do, but I'm not going to ask you for help. I'm just going to do it because I'm an adult. So that article just kind of talks about the need for certain people to maybe back off the requests of helping people or asking for help. And the only person in that relationship who can stop it is the person who's most frustrated by it. I went through a phase where I tried to over help. Like anytime somebody asks, just yes and yes and yes, because you think at some point they're going to realize that they're asking too much. Like for me personally, I get this sense of like guilt or like, dude, figure it out in my own self. So it's like I hesitate to pick up the phone and call for help. Did you try everything you could? But there's a type of person, and it's out there and it's pretty prevalent, who doesn't even like take that first step of thinking about how to do it themselves. Their first step is, how can I get someone else to do this for me? And I don't even think it's necessarily a desire to be lazy. It's just how they operate. And so they're not going to stop. They're not going to realize that they're putting a lot of extra work onto you. For them, they're getting help and they think you enjoy it. And you're probably not mean about it, right? You're nice about it. Like, oh yeah, they think you like doing these things. If you're not open about it and you don't tell them, hey, this is getting to be too much, then they'll just keep asking and you'll just keep getting more and more frustrated. So that article was on Wednesday, Becoming the Jerk. And then I almost hesitate to plug this one because I've shared this article a lot. I changed the name of it for this throwback article this week. It's called From CPAP to Mouth Tape. One of the earlier articles that I wrote when I first jumped back into writing articles last year, and I have recorded this one once before, and it was before I had kind of committed to recording these articles. So that article is called From CPAP to Mouth Tape, and it just sort of tracks my journey, a little bit of weight loss, and then realizing that, you know what, maybe I don't need to be on a CPAP anymore. And sure enough, I'm now over a year. That article was written like a year ago, almost to the day. But I was able to, through weight loss and just some testing that I did with my smartwatch and some other things that I did to get off of that CPAP. It's a good article. I think that's a good article to read, not necessarily listen to. You have it in the Uncredible readings on Spotify, but that's one of those articles where I show a lot of screenshots from my own personal tests that I did in order to slowly wean myself off of and gain confidence in the mouth tape. So getting off the CPAP and then leaning into the mouth tape. So it's going to be different for every person, but for me, yeah, I was a CPAP user. I didn't mind using the CPAP. A lot of people hate the CPAP. I didn't mind it, but the mouth tape's way better. And in my case, my CPAP was dying. So it was kind of like an either get a new one or get off of it. And for me, having lost the weight that I had lost and gotten into better shape, I was able to switch to mouth tape. So that's kind of that whole journey. Now, next week, I'm excited for our article next week. I kind of wish this is one of those situations where I wish I wasn't ahead on my articles, because I would have liked to have had this article come out this week. But we just completed the Winter Beast Challenge that I had going on Strava. There was only 9 of us doing it. But the goal was to run 100 miles in the winter through the winter. A lot of times what happens with people when they're when they have workout programs or diets or anything like that is when you get around the Christmas season, and particularly when the winter starts to go south, and you didn't go south, you kind of like put all those goals aside. And sort of as a motivating thing for myself, but also to get some other people involved as well, created the Strava group and called it the Uncredible Winter Beast Challenge. And basically it was just run 100 miles a month through the winter months, December, January, February. And this article, Becoming Winter Beast, will come out next Wednesday. And it basically talks about the things that I learned, the major things that I learned. And it's kind of a shout out to the people who were part of that group, small group of people, but we all went through it. And I know there's probably a lot of people who run through the winter. I discovered a whole bunch on Instagram that were just every day they just run through the winter. So it's not like new to them. But for me personally, it's the first time I've done this, and really excited about the article. The header image came out phenomenal, and excited about the stats in that as well. We cleared almost 2,500 winter miles between the 9 of us over the course of the 3 months. So just kind of cool to see those numbers stack up. And some of us were walking, some of us were treadmilling a little bit, but for the most part, everyone was running outdoors or getting out into the outdoors. So pretty good article. It'll be fun to see the stats. And if you're interested in the Strava group, jump into that actual article on uncredible.me, and there's a link to the Strava group. And then there's also there's a link back to the first article when I actually launched it initially, so you can get all that information there on what's going on behind the scenes. There's also a link in there for on the merch website, merch.uncredible.me. I have a sweatshirt that says I ran. I think it says Uncredible Winter Beast. It's got a picture of like a snow wolf or a wolf in the snow, and then it says I ran 100 winter miles or something like that. Something you can get as a sticker, a shirt, whatever. I got the sweatshirt. Maybe I'll wear it in the next episode if it's not too hot down here. Weather's actually coming back here. So, but yeah, Becoming Winter Beast, that'll be next week. And then next week's throwback article is The Death of Everyday Tech. I really like that article. And it really gets you thinking about what technology will disappear. I wrote an article a couple weeks ago. Actually, it was the throwback article a couple weeks ago was talking about, all the technology that when I was a kid, that just vanished. That just disappeared, that my kids won't ever see, they won't ever experience. I know it's probably not on camera, but right in front of me, I have a VCR that I use for converting VHS tapes. Just kind of cool to have on the desk. But yeah, the next article, which is coming next week, the follow-up to that was, okay, so when I was a kid, My grandfather had a record player, a 8-track player, all kinds of technology that was just sort of floating around, and you just don't see it anymore. It doesn't exist. It's not needed. It's not necessary. You might see it in like a episode of American Pickers or something like that, but you're not going to come across it. And then if you extrapolate that concept, look at my own kids, and then push forward, what types of things will their children not even know existed? I don't know if you've ever seen those videos of they take little kids and hand them like a Walkman. Like how do you use this? How do you do this, right? It's crazy to think about how technology moves and changes, and I suggest in this article some of the things that I think might be going away in a generation or two, and trying to sort of, based on the technology we have today, predict where it's going. So yeah, those are the articles from this week and the ones coming up next week on uncredible.me. Check that out. Subscribe. You'll get those articles right in your email if you subscribe. Subscribing is free. Currently, I'm thinking down the road, maybe like a year from now, making their like a pay tier. But right now, I'm just putting everything on there. The audio version of the Uncredible readings is also on those. I don't know how that comes through on the email, but certainly on the website, there's a play button you can click. So you don't have to read the articles. You can just listen to them. Those are on Spotify as well. I've pushed that before in the past, where you can just go to Uncredible readings, and there's a ton of those out there as well. So check those things out. Yeah. So, all right. This is going to be probably the shortest weekly update, but let's get into our weekly update. So this week was week 9 of marathon training, and absolutely 0 mileage this week. And as I mentioned at the opening of the show, you can hear in my voice, I've got a cold. Actually, before recording this episode, I recorded 2 of the Uncredible readings, and I could feel like my voice was going out, and I thought, maybe I should stop that because I still got to record the podcast, and I don't want my voice to go out during the podcast. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I go for a run? Because I haven't run all week. I've been sick, not feeling it. Let's go for a run. Come home, take a shower, clean up. Hopefully that'll clear the sinuses out. By the way, for me personally, when I go out for a run like that, it seems to open up my sinuses. So that's just my experience. So I was thinking, hey, that'll be great. Maybe clear some things out, get some water in me, get some exercise and relax a little bit. But like I said, started pouring down rain outside. So yeah. So this week I'll go through it despite the fact that I didn't do anything. On Monday, literally my notes, by the way, say rest because of a cold. Rest because of a cold. I already erased it. Rest because of a cold. I have a sheet that I planned my whole week out, and I've already replanned next week because I wrote SICK across the bottom of it. And this week was one of those weeks where I really had to practice restraint. I'm the type of person that wants to prove myself to myself and to others. Like, I'm sick, but I still ran. It's cold, but I still ran through the winter. And by the way, I am so glad that this particular cold did not show up until today, because let me tell you, if I had gotten this cold during the Winter Beast Challenge in the winter, I would have been done. I would not have gotten the 100 miles every month. I would have been laid up. I was legitimately laid up this week for the whole week. Now, even today. So normally I come home from work. Right now it's actually Saturday morning at 3 a.m, but today for me is yesterday. Normally I come home from work on Friday morning, record this podcast. I'll be up till about noon, 1 o'clock, and take a nap, and then I'll be up at like 8 p.m., sync up the audio on this, and then go to bed. And then at this time the next day, which would be Saturday, but I'll have slept, start doing some editing work or whatever. I couldn't do it today. Like I probably should have recorded this podcast then, but I just was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just continue this resting process. But all that to say, every day this week, I was like, if I run now, I might get myself laid up even further. Now, the way my current strategy right now for my marathon training is Monday, Tuesday are relatively laid back runs, but anywhere from 7 to 8, and then Thursday maybe 10 to 11 miles. Wednesday's a nice little rest day, some mobility, which I haven't been doing, if I'm being honest. And then Thursday, I usually get out there and do another 10, 11 miles. So my initial plan when this cold set in, which if you remember from last week, I don't know if I said this last week or not. I probably didn't. So last Saturday, I got out and ran 16 miles. Great run. Kind of surprised I didn't put that in here. Oh, I did. I'm an idiot. So last Saturday, 16 miles at like a 10:30 pace, super relaxed, wasn't hard, and the weather was nice, very little muscle tightness, some in the hips, but nothing bad. But when I got home, I was just like drained physically. Like I was actually really happy about the way the run went, but I was drained, so I started eating, whatever. Boy, I woke up last Sunday morning, with this cold setting in, and I was like, whew. I immediately went to I used ChatGPT to build this 20-week training block. And I was like, this particular section of the training block is just trying to add mileage and distance. And it's a 4-week process. It's week 7 through 10. And I got to 41, almost 42 miles last week. So I went in and I said, what happens? I'm almost halfway through the training block. What happens if I throw a deload week in here where I don't do much of anything? And it said, it's not going to set you back too much. And it gave me some recommendations on what to do. So my original plan was Sunday's a rest day and Wednesday's a rest day. I was going to take Monday and Tuesday. That's 4 days combined of rest. And then I was going to get out there Thursday and start cranking. But I don't know how you are with when you get a cold, but I have this weird process where the initial day to day and a half of the cold is just brutal, barely manageable. Fever, nose is running. You get the chapped nose from blowing your nose so much. Throat's swollen, terrible. And then somewhere around 36 hours, I'll go to bed and I'll wake up and it's kind of like the fever broke. You had a cold sweat. You're just like, oh, but you feel great. And I know that's a trap. Like just having been around and dealt with colds, I know that's a trap. And so that happened on, I got the cold Sunday. I know Sunday night was terrible. Monday, I think it happened Monday afternoon. And then I went to work Tuesday night and was pretty kind of like, not great. Still taking medication too, like Tylenol and some things for the congestion. And so you got to keep that in mind as well. So, by Wednesday, I was feeling okay, and I was like, Thursday's game. Like I think I can run Thursday, but I couldn't decide how many miles I wanted to run, and I didn't want to push it too hard. And Thursday rolled around, and I was like, there's the risk that if I go out and run, that this cold could set back in again. I think it was rainy that day too, a little chilly and rainy, and I thought, if I go out there and run, knowing myself, I'm going to push myself probably too far. I'll probably do, instead of 8, I'll do 10 because I skipped those other 2 days. And I could just tell that I probably would get back into this cold, and I don't want to lose more than 1 week. So I skipped Thursday, clearly skipped Friday, and I was actually just about to go out and do a very long run and didn't do it. So basically this week has been just a week where I had to hold myself back and just accept the fact that not every week's going to be perfect. I went 8 weeks consecutively very strong. So it's okay that the 8th week is a relaxing time. I was very happy with the long run last Saturday, the 16 miles. I really didn't try for pace, and I ended up getting a decent pace. And look, it was roughly 10 minutes and 30 seconds per mile at 16 miles, which, given the route that I was taking, really wasn't bad at all in terms of just what happened, because that required me to go up a very steep hill 3 times. And it's a steep hill that I basically walk up. So when I try to extrapolate that over to, like, when I do the marathon, my goal is a 9-minute pace or just under a 9-minute pace. I'm hoping that that'll translate. And I can't remember, I'm pretty sure I stopped and walked for a couple of situations where I felt things getting tight. And I kept telling myself, listen, your goal is 11 minutes per mile, 11 to 12, because I was really trying to back it off. And, surprisingly enough, it ended up being a pretty decent run overall. Got the cold, of course, probably overdid it in terms of my immune system, but, it is what it is. So I'm looking forward to getting back into, I want to do like 17 miles today. I was actually going to go do that now. I'll do it after the podcast now. But kind of looking forward to doing like 17 miles today and just letting that be the whole week. And then jump in Monday and try to go for, I think I have on my schedule for next week, 43 or 44 miles, with the end of the week being 18. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to keep the middle of the week between 8 and 10, and then just tick up Saturday's long run 1 mile at a time and really get the fueling down. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I think I've been failing myself in terms of fueling in our podcast segment a little bit later. But I think I fueled much better on Saturday as well. So I think that played a factor in my pace and my morale staying up throughout the whole 16-mile run. So long story short of this past week in terms of the weekly update and the marathon training, just took it all in and got healed up from this cold. So it was a nasty cold. Again, very thankful that this did not happen during the Winter Beast Challenge. I think it's a little ironic that it didn't happen during the Winter Beast Challenge because of all the cold weather that I literally ran through. I mean, I got down as low as -20 on one of my runs. I kind of feel like I deserved it a month ago or a month and a half ago because of all the running I did outside. But we didn't get it, and I was able to complete the Winter Beast Challenge. So that's kind of exciting. I'm glad I was able to do it that way. So, all right, yeah, that's our weekly update. Now let's get into the news and let's look at our Uncredible take. And this week it's pretty easy to pick something to talk about because in the last week we went to war with Iran, and I even put in my notes, well, not really war, but kind of war. But definitely war, but definitely not war. It's been a very weird messaging from the people who lead us in the United States. I do want to point out, and I'll come back to this too a little bit later. I did not expect when I launched my episode last week that we would actually be at war this quickly. Tucker Carlson's interview with Mike Huckabee I was hopeful would have pump the brakes on this thing a little bit. He seemed to be asking the right questions at a very public scale. Tucker Carlson's not like a little podcaster who gets 15 views a week. That's whatever, or per episode. He gets millions of, I don't know what he probably gets, so we'll just say millions of views. So people are watching that and they're seeing it. And so when I did my review of their conversation and kind of looked at the biblical background of what's going on between the alignment between a lot of evangelical eschatology and Orthodox Jewish eschatology, I had no idea that we would literally turn around and be at war with Iran. And again, I say we're at war or we're not. They're calling it targeted strikes. There won't be boots on the ground. It's very reminiscent of the Iraq War. It's somewhat concerning in that sense because the Iraq War just dragged on and on. It's, Trump specifically said he wasn't going to be a part of regime change wars. It's one of the reasons a lot of people were okay with voting for him. And I just wanted to share a couple of my thoughts about the war, mainly because my takes are just uncredible. Just a guy looking at the news and going just like regular guy thoughts, okay? First of all, when I think about this war with Iran, it's like, why? Like, what is the real reason behind it? And what I wouldn't give for a real reason. I genuinely believe some people just have religious motivations at this point, and then they have to cover that up with what are considered like politically acceptable reasons. But I don't understand this whole desire to be involved with what's going on overseas. But my uncredible take, I was talking to somebody at work about, Trump taking us into this war. And I remember back to the election and what was going on in the last presidential cycle. And at that time, the issue was more with Russia and Ukraine. And stepping back from this and just kind of zooming out just a little bit, my thought on this is it didn't really matter if we elected Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, it appears as though we were going to have a war. Like one way or another, we were going to be at war, whether it was somehow intervening in this Ukraine-Russia thing, or in this case, the Israel-Iran thing, which, again, I don't really understand our commitment in that particular way. I wonder if there's a lot of economic things I don't fully understand, like about the Strait of Hormuz or whatever's going on over there, like the trade routes and things. Like if Israel wasn't there, then those Muslim countries might cut us out, if that's the concern. I mean, we really have not made friends over there, if we're honest, over the last, 50 years, 60 years. We haven't made any friends in that area. So I guess if it was, if Israel wasn't there, then I guess you could argue that we would have a hard time trading and they'd have a monopoly on that area. So I do wonder if there are economic aspects, but it does really seem like it's a lot of religious motivation and people who are religious being involved with that. So that's my first uncredible take, is just, I don't think that anything was going to keep us from being at war. This Epstein thing, it seems like, has been effectively purged from the news cycle. I don't know if you guys noticed this or not, but the Epstein files came out, and then we had like a week or two in the news cycle of talk about UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or UAPs. I don't even know what that stands for. And so the news cycle kind of jumped on that for a little bit and got a little bit distracted, but it wasn't enough. And then this happens, and this is all that's consuming the media. Like very few people are talking about the Epstein files now. And who knows if that's part of the motivation as part of going to war now. Because that's one of the big questions, is like, why now? One of my favorite things that I've seen a number of people get after is this whole idea of Iran being 1 to 2 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. I mean, the whole thing between the Epstein files and this Iran war, it's been completely botched by the administration. And I think at this point, with the internet and podcasts and people having even half of a memory, it's wild to me that they can say the things that they say thinking we don't remember like a week ago. And it got me thinking about how AI is really making it hard to trust anything. I actually wrote an article. This is very reminiscent of the book 1984 and the Ministry of Truth. And this article is probably not but 3 weeks away now, or 2 weeks away. But I mean, with the advent of AI, there's just a lot of information, and a lot of it is difficult to track. And there's two aspects of how AI is affecting what we see. First of all, I was listening to Breaking Points, and they were talking about how AI might have been used to identify targets, and the AI information may have been outdated. If you've ever used like ChatGPT or OpenAI for anything, you know that sometimes it flops a little bit. It's like, why'd you do that? I've had multiple instances where I've had to even question the AI and say, why are you making this a certain way? And it'll be like, I'm not. And then you're like, no, you definitely are. And so it makes mistakes. And if you don't go back and check them, you can have a real big problem. And one of the concerns right now is that if they're using AI to identify targets, it might be wrong. And this goes to, there's a pretty awful situation where there was like a school for girls that was hit with what's called a double tap attack, where they strike it, get people to rush out and rush to it to help, and then strike it again to get maximum damage. It sounds like a terrible situation, and the way the administration is responding to it suggests that maybe we were a part of that somehow. So possibly bad information, either from Israel or from AI. It's hard to say. But AI is doing two things right now. Is one, like, people are using AI for their research, and it's producing all kinds of content that's hard to verify or not verify. And the article that I wrote that's coming out is just kind of talks about the sheer volume of information that's out there that makes it very difficult to know if anything's true or if we can trust anything that comes out. Because I can have this view and this view, and then I can go to AI and I go, prove that view. And AI can do both. It'll find sources. It'll generate sources for you if you need it to. And it's very difficult to do any real research anymore because everyone has a source. Everyone looks credible, which is why I'm kind of excited that I'm not credible. That's my whole point, is that I'm just going off of what I see. And this is what I see. But the other side that I wanted to really talk about in the podcast, because I have an article coming out about the volume of information, is AI is really making it hard to trust anything. And I don't know if you've seen, it used to be you could go to X or Twitter and get like videos and clips straight from what was happening. You know, there was a shooting here, or this accident happened here, or this big news story here. And it was, minutes later, people had videos of it online to start circulating. Well, because hits and views are kind of like the currency now, and AI is so well equipped to generate this stuff, you're starting to see fake news stories come out, and it makes the propaganda situation very hard to follow. For a couple of days, there was an article or a headline that kept popping up that said Bibi Netanyahu had been killed in an airstrike right after they were claiming the Ayatollah had been killed. And, well, which is true. Now, immediately, this is just my personal feelings. Immediately, when I saw the Ayatollah had been killed, I was like, ooh, so they got him in a bombing strike. But when I saw that Bibi Netanyahu had been killed, I was like, that sounds like AI. And I have no justification for one or the other. I don't know where the propaganda is coming from and who's pushing it. So it's very concerning that, that like Iran could be generating for its own people facts, right? AI generated stuff that their people believe, right? Like, oh, we just took out an American vessel. We're close to victory. Just lie to their people so they get stronger military. But then you think about that, right? Like, hey, if you're trying to inspire your people to fight harder and give them hope, well, if they're doing that, what if my country's doing that? How would I know the difference, right? AI is getting so good that it's very difficult to tell. By the way, the other thing I saw, and again, all of this might be AI, like all the stuff I see, these headlines and stuff, very difficult to trust any of it. But I did see that apparently there's something circulating, which may be not true. I didn't verify it. But supposedly Iran had shadows, like airplanes painted on an airstrip, and we bombed one, and it's nothing. It's like, it goes back to the World War II, where I think there was, I should look this up. I think this was on 99% Invisible. Maybe if I can find it, I'll link this in the show notes. But they did an episode talking about like blow up tanks and things like that, like fake, basically creating the image of a larger army than what actually existed to put fear in the enemy. And I think that was World War I or World War II where they did that, where on the horizon you could see these, there wasn't anything there. It was just a campaign to make them think that they had been beaten and scare them into basically throwing in the white flag. And like I said, I just thought of that just now talking about it. But propaganda is becoming so easy to execute. And what it is I talk about this in the article that I wrote. Now that AI is so good and research is so kind of lackadaisical, like kind of lazy. If I have this belief that, let's say I believe that UFOs are real, I can go to AI and go, show me sources that show that the Earth has been visited by aliens. And I'll get all kinds of source material. I don't have to read any of it. And if I have such a crazy idea that I can't find a source through AI, I can say, generate me a source for AI, like from AI that proves this point. And so now I have that source. And it all depends on how honest the person doing the research is. But it brings me back to the fact that, and I mentioned this, I think it was in one of the previous episodes when I was talking about the Epstein files, like nobody's really reading source material. They're not getting down to, and I don't even know if you can anymore because there's so much quote source material. Now it used to be when you did a research paper, or I'm assuming journalism was this way too, everything was on physical paper and everyone kind of had access to the same primary sources and credible sources. and they could dig those up, and you could interpret them differently, but everyone could kind of look. There was like 5 sources, right? But now there's an infinite number of sources because everyone has a cell phone. And as quickly as my cell phone video can be debunked with someone else's AI generated cell phone video, right? It's just, and you see this all the time with these news stories. You go back to the ICE raids, which, by the way, news cycle, by the way, ICE raids, Epstein files, UAPs, and now war, all in the last month and a half. Ever since I started this podcast, that's been the news cycle. It's crazy how fast it is. But because there's so much information, depending on which perspective you take, you can come to any conclusion. So you go back to those ICE shootings where this one short clip of this situation makes it look like, oh, this cop just shot through someone's windshield. Oh, well, then you zoom out and you get another angle and you realize, oh, that looks even worse. And now it looks like she was trying to hit him with her car. And then you back up the timeline, you find a recording from, a couple minutes earlier where she was beeping and honking, and all of a sudden that changes your perspective. There's so much information out there, and you never know when a new piece of information will change your perspective and prove your point. And what happens, because people are generally dishonest, they come to a conclusion first and then they support it with their data. The proper process is to form your conclusions based on the data. But what happens is people have a position, they have an ideology. In America, it's Republican or Democrat. I mean, that's kind of your choices. Or you could be like libertarian, anarchist, whatever. But you have a set position and you don't sway from that position. You just stick to it. And the way you stick to it is you just keep finding things that support your position. And it's made worse by the fact that we have the algorithm, which I'm sure is AI generated, that feeds you what you want to see. So like if I see somebody that doesn't agree with me, I'm gonna thumbs down, right? Disagree. Well, then the algorithm's not going to feed me that anymore. And it's slowly going to sort those things out. And so people kind of get down these little information tunnels and they get stuck in them. And that's it. We just end up stuck in our own ways and believing what we believe because there's so much proof, AI generated or otherwise, that there's no way to disprove it. And most people, when when I was in an academic circle studying for the master's degree and my bachelor's degree, you'd write a 10-page paper, double space, like 5 pages, and you would need like 8 works citations. I mean, when you think about it, I can have AI generate me 30 citations like that, like no problem. And it doesn't matter what my premise is. I should probably do that. I should probably write a dummy paper on some crazy idea and see if I can get AI to generate the sources and that kind of thing. It's like, at this point, it's so hard to do any genuine, real research that we can't know what's right. We can't know what's true. And that's been, especially with this particular war. I remember with the war in Iraq, how people were saying there were no weapons of mass destruction, but it was like the information wasn't coming on mainstream, so you weren't seeing that as much. So you were like, that's probably not true. So it wasn't credible. But now with the emergence of podcasts and independent people and things like that, now it's like CNN and Fox News will say one thing, and then you'll get 30 podcasts that are like, that's bull crap. That's not true. Here's this document. Here's this document. Here's this document. And what's the average uncredible working person supposed to do? Right? You can turn off Fox News and CNN and start listening to these podcasts, and the algorithm will direct you to one that you like, and it'll feed you what you want to hear. But how do you get to the actual truth? Like you want to be able to trust somebody, but who do you trust? The people who agree with you. So it puts you in a really weird place where it's hard to really question anything you actually believe, because hopefully the majority of Americans are honest enough. And I don't think this is true, honestly, now that I'm saying it out loud, but you would hope that people are honest enough to say, hey, if I found evidence to the contrary, I would change my views. I don't think that's very common. I don't think the majority of Americans are open to that. I think they're convinced of what they believe, and then they search for, and I shouldn't even just say Americans, I think people in general, they just search for things that agree with them, that prove their point and keep them comfortably in, even if what they believe is wrong, comfortably in that place. So that's my incredible take. I will say, if it's not obvious by what I'm saying, not a fan of this war. I do think there's a lot of religious motivation behind the scenes, especially given a lot of the people that are involved with it. My uncredible take, though, is first of all, that AI is making it very hard to know what's going on over there. Propaganda has been made infinitely more easy in a way that I don't think the book 1984 really planned on. If you've ever heard of the phrase "death by 1,000 cuts," that's kind of where we're at with the digital information age. It's like, oh, well, all you have to do is find source documentation. There's millions of source documentation now, right? Like, I could be a reporter, right, who comes back from an event and says, I saw this happen, primary source. And then all of a sudden, the Quickie Mart across the corner has a camcorder that's pointed right at me where I was at the time, and that shows a different view. Primary source, right? And then, someone else may have another video from the other corner that proves that video was altered by AI, and so that one's not true. Well, maybe the one, you see, we've created this world where in 1984, they would just put in memory holes, they would burn, they would incinerate things that disagreed. But now what they do, instead of incinerating the information, they just create more of it. And it's sort of like a battle of quantities. Like 5 sources say this and 1 says this, so the 5 wins. But now it's 5 million sources say this and 1 million say this. Well, who's going to go through all of that? Who's going to do all that? And it's the sheer volume of the information that becomes difficult to manage for any average, uncredible person. We can't see through it. We don't know what's going on. So, my whole thing for this war that's just popped up out of nowhere, it's basically this simple fact. There's too much information for people to know what's right and what's not and what's true. And I'm not sure what that means for the future of news media and the future of people coming to critique their own ideas and growing as individuals. People are just going to get very set in their own ways. And it's interesting to me that we're living in a world where this is happening, where truth as a whole is being questioned, and it's leading to war, religious war, no less. Some might argue whether or not this is a religious war. Certainly a religious war on their side. Man, there's some crazy. I'm going to share a clip. In fact, maybe I'll make this my main topic, but I'm going to share a clip where they talk about this being kind of a religious war. A couple of Republicans have come out and called this a religious war. I think they mean from the Muslim side, from the Iranian side, that they've been at war with us. Knowing their background and based on what I talked about last week about the religious overlap, the eschatological overlap, it's hard for me to believe that this isn't somehow motivated for some politicians who are heavy evangelicals, somehow motivated by a desire to bring about the end times. So, So since I'm saying that, and I'm going to do that, let's get into our main topic. And what I've decided to do, I don't know why I'm doing this right now, but I'm going to move what was going to be a podcast feature into my main topic. I just watched this tonight. I guess it was last night before the clock turned midnight. But I'm just going to reference this. I'm not going to show any clips or anything. But there is on YouTube and Spotify a news organization called Breaking Points. They've been around for a long time, and they kind of pitch themselves as being unbiased. I think there is a bias there, but their goal is to try to just true raw journalism. That's their stated goal. And I think generally their personal beliefs do come through, but they do try to stay objective. And I've seen that. I don't watch them that closely. I just happen to come back to them because I've been trying to get a different perspective on all this Iran war stuff. And I was blown away. There's an episode. This is on YouTube. It's actually a segment. So they do a whole newscast. and then they break it up into sections, and then they post those sections. And they did an episode called, this is the segment name, Lindsey Graham, Iran is Holy War to Remake Middle East. So what they talked about, and they had a special guest on who's one of their hosts, but she does stuff with Megyn Kelly as well, Emily Jashinsky. I'll link her information in the show notes, and I'll link this episode. I don't want to get too crazy with the overlay clips. This is worth watching the whole thing. But they talk. This is the first time in this type of a format that I've ever heard the phrase dispensationalism mentioned on like a major secular, like a newscast, and linking it to what's going on in the Middle East. And I remember when I was studying dispensationalism back in, the early 2000s and into the mid 2013, 14, 15, that time frame, both for my undergrad and my master's degree, I remember thinking to myself and drawing this conclusion, because it was Iraq War was the first round with studying and was still going on. And then, all this conflict was going on. I think Lebanon might have been going on. I have to look at the timeline. But I just wondered how much of it was motivated by these religious beliefs that I was studying in my own seminary and in my own Bible college. And that's what kind of motivated my episode last week to talk about, the Tucker Carlson, Mike Huckabee interview was kind of glancing the theological aspects, but it wasn't specifically referencing dispensationalism, which I do genuinely believe, at least on the evangelical Christian side, is motivating their choices. I think it's heavily motivating their choices. And last week I drew that link between the dispensational eschatology and the overlap between that and the Orthodox Jewish eschatology. So what I did was done 10 times better by this episode, where they talked about the way in which these theological points are motivating these people. And they actually had clips of like the Secretary of War or Secretary of Defense, I think that's who it was, talking about these things. So I just want to tell you, go listen to this little brief episode of Breaking Points. Check it out. Maybe for my next podcast episode, I'll pull more of this out if this continues to show up. But they talk about the rebuilding of the Third Temple, why that's important to Jews, and why that would also be important to dispensational Christians. Now, I think what she missed, which I think is significant, it wasn't specifically important to what they were talking about, but one of the things I think she missed is that I don't think you have to be a card-carrying member of dispensationalism to carry these views. And where I think there may have been either a gap in her knowledge or possibly a conscious decision not to discuss it this way, because it gets so tedious, is recognizing that there's a lot of what might be called non-denominational evangelical churches that might not even know. Like if I said to you, yeah, I think you're a dispensationalist, they would be like, I've never even heard of that. I don't know what that is. But you start talking about the rapture, end times, premillennialism, you start getting into those aspects of it, and you would find that they hold to all those major beliefs. And I think an important book, I don't have it on the shelf. I went and checked. I don't know why I don't have it on the shelf. I probably got rid of it. But when I was really deep into studying dispensationalism, I did this is a legitimate deep dive on Charles Ryrie's dispensationalism. He wrote a book called Dispensationalism, and it perfectly characterized dispensationalism, how I think it's still currently believed to be held today. Whether it's even called that anymore or not isn't the point. But what dispensationalism became in the early 90s, into the 2000s, and I think presently still exists in eschatological form in churches, is a full commitment to the nation of Israel, a separation of Israel and the church. And I have to dig to see if I could find the article. Might be out there. It might be out there. But at one point, I used his terminology in my religious podcast and in my religious writings my articles that I used to write to say, hey, as a Reformed Baptist, I reject this idea, this concept that there is a substantial, meaningful difference between the Israel and the church. And I think I basically narrowed it down to that being one of the key problems, because like Ryrie had what he called 3 sine qua nons, 3 essentials, and that was one of them. And it was the only one that I felt what I wasn't aligned with. I'd have to go back and check the other one. And I personally felt like he violated one of them as well. But there is this heavy commitment to historical, grammatical approach to hermeneutics, which is the study of the Bible. And that aggressive perspective in certain areas leads you, as Emily mentions in Breaking Points, leads you to this belief that when the Bible talks about Israel, it equals Israel today. Like there's an equivalency. And it's a question that Tucker and Mike Huckabee were kind of dancing around as to whether or not that is an equivalency that you should make today. Whether or not today the nation of Israel, the IDF, all these things are equivalent to what is talked about in the Old Testament, and whether or not, from a New Testament perspective, those things matter. Just me saying that would be offensive to a dispensationalist, but I would say the majority of Christians, I think Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, I'd have to look into this more closely, they reject the whole dispensational view. Most of them agree that the majority, like, the abomination of desolation and Daniel's 70 weeks is all complete. The only ones that are waiting for Christ to return and leave Israel behind to do seven more years of something or other from the book of Revelation are people who lean this direction. So what I'm saying is, I think one thing that she missed is dispensationalism proper is not required for someone to hold these views. And she kind of hinted at it towards the end. And that's the tricky thing about bringing up dispensationalism in general. It is the theology. It is the proper theology behind a lot of these belief systems. But we live in a world where nobody cares what the frameworking is anymore. You just believe stuff. And the reason I used Dr. David Jeremiah last week is because I would say that in terms of like one of the things that she says in her interview here is that, I don't think dispensationalism is really that popular anymore. I'm like, he's still doing it. I mean, let me check. While we're here, we'll just do this. We'll do this the Uncredible way. I'm pretty sure he probably has a book out right now. Let's see. Turning Points Ministry, Dr. David Jeremiah. Yeah, he's got. Let's see. Just wanted to see if he had a new thing. Right now he's promoting, it looks like, When Your World Falls Apart. Let me just do this. I mean, the guy can't help himself. He puts out a new book every couple of months. Is this it? Let's see. Yeah, October 2025. The Promise of Heaven, 31 Reasons to Get Excited About Your Eternal Home. So that's more of like a heaven thing. But, I mean, David Jeremiah is probably, I would say, the most prominent current dispensationalist. I don't even know if he would call himself a dispensationalist, because he promotes the theology, he pushes the theology, but he doesn't really, he's really good at not like getting deep into the weeds with theological terminology. Another person is John Hagee. Let's see if he's a what would be called a mid-tribulation. John Hagee. Let's see. I'm just doing this live because I wasn't even thinking about talking about that. Yeah, he's still going strong. This is as of 2024. Let's try this. I mean, John Hagee, like a decade ago, maybe not that long ago, wrote a whole book about the 4 blood moons. I mean, and how that's signaling the end of the soon return. I mean, let me just double check this. That's crazy. This might not be okay. So this is more of a gospel type. Okay, here we go. Is this soon to be brought out? Like I typed in John Hagee books and it says God's prophetic clock. It's 2026. So I mean, there's still these guys are still active. They're still very prominent. And I think what's important to note is that this is not going away. There's a strong, I mentioned in the last podcast that my colleges, both colleges, which were dispensational, Baptist Bible College or Clark Summit University, was heavy into dispensationalism. Just because those schools are closed doesn't mean it's gone away. I should probably look it up, but I would be willing to bet that like Liberty University, for example, is probably dispensational in its teaching. Now, again, what you'll hear from these guys is that they don't make eschatology a point of division, but then they're just going to teach it, heavily. And the way I was taught it anyway, they're going to knock any other belief system, amillennialism, post-trib or post-historic millennialism. They're just going to mock it and make fun of it and talk about why it's ridiculous. But somehow their view that God still has to come back and, punish Israel for 7 years is not weird. And again, it's not necessarily punishing Israel. It's just punishing the earth and they get left behind. So I think this is still extremely potent in our day and age. But I think she does make a really good point. And she points out that, and I think this is what's causing this to happen now, is these people who were brought up in this eschatology's heyday, the Left Behind series, Tim LaHaye, that whole 90s, early 2000s trend. Some of those people have lived through all these prophecies becoming fulfilled in the nation of Israel through the 1900s. They're older, but they're also now in power. So it's like it's starting to all come together for them. It's starting to, from their psyche, it's like, oh, I've been waiting my entire... One thing David Jeremiah used to say a lot is, I can't predict when the end will come or when the rapture will come, because God says nobody knows the day or the hour, but I'm confident it's going to happen in my lifetime. So I used to get like really irritated with this stuff, I'd say, I guarantee it won't happen in your lifetime. Because there's one of two options. It happens, I'm wrong, and I have to deal with that, whatever that means, right? The rapture happens and he's chuckling at me up in heaven or something. Or you die and then another person behind you comes along and says the same thing. And I'm like, he said it and now you're saying it and I'm going to say it again. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And you go, oh, that's dangerous. Something could happen. Okay, sure. But I think the odds are leaning in my favor right now. So, and this happens all the time with these types of preachers. So, but again, my point is, check out this Breaking Points episode. I'll link it in the show notes. And start thinking about this fact that religion is playing a huge role in this Iran war, and consider that when you think about theology. Is God bringing these things about? Or are people hopeful that the rapture will happen, bringing these things about? Like in what ways are we pushing these tragic events? Tragic things are happening, like awful things that just shouldn't, this bombing of this school of young girls. That's just, for religious reasons. Say, oh, it's not religious reasons. Okay, sure. Great episode, great information. Like I said, I think there were some holes in what she had to say, based on what she described herself as. She's coming at it from an outside perspective looking in. I promise you, there's no way. It's kind of an unfair thing to say, but there's a very difficult to understand how deep this thing goes if you weren't in it. And I was in it. And you come out one of two ways: jaded from it or fully believing it. And I mean, the amount of information that was fed to me that I rejected, and the fact that I was not able to find a job because of this issue, specifically this issue, I was turned down by 9 churches back in 2015, 2014, this issue. And I'm not saying the end times, the Israel issue, specifically how you view Israel in the New Testament, it is the sine qua non, it is the essential part, and I think it's what's at the root of, a Mike Huckabee, for example. And she even points out also in her episode, which I think was wise to point out, Mike Huckabee is almost definitely a dispensationalist. He might not even know it by that terminology, but I guarantee you, if I fed him the 3 sine qua nons from Ryrie's dispensationalism, he would fully agree with them. And I bet you I could nail him down to being a pre-trib, premillennialist. I was not able to find clips. He was a former pastor, but just the way he talks puts him either mid or pre-trib, just my side of it. I'd love to hear him come out and say one way or the other, but that's my guess on it. So, yeah, check out that episode. I think it'd be really beneficial and really breaking points in general. Great news organization. I actually dialed them up. I put them up on my phone. I was literally going to listen to an hour episode while I ran this morning when it started raining. So maybe more coming from them in the future. All right, let's get into our podcast feature. This week's podcast feature, and I mentioned this in our weekly review, was an episode of the Buffalo Marathon podcast. And let me just say before I get into this, I'm kind of stoked. I think this might be the first year they've done this. I'm not sure because there's only 3 episodes, so it's not like you can go back to past episodes. Or maybe they do it every year and they just delete the old ones and bring up new ones. I don't know. But they're really going out of their way to help people train for the Buffalo Marathon, and I appreciate it. And this, I'm going to go back and probably try to keep track of this and keep my focus on it. But this Buffalo Marathon podcast had guest Shannon Wilson, and episode 3 was talking about fueling. And I was listening to it, and I actually only listened to like 30 minutes of it, tossed it to the side, came back to it, listened to another 20 minutes of it, and then finished it up. But it wasn't really a whole lot of at first it wasn't a whole lot of information that I was surprised at, but then I realized I wasn't listening to it fully. So she kept saying, one of the things that stood out to me was she kept saying that in a marathon, you need I think she said 90 grams of carbs per hour was kind of the standard expectation. And I kept hearing that or translating that in my own head as 90 calories. And so in my head, I was like, oh, I'm nailing that because my gels have 100 calories and I take 1 gel an hour, right? And it's not quite an hour. It's like every 45 minutes. So I'm like, I'm good. But then she said it so many times that at one point I go, oh, she's saying carbs. She's not saying calories. She's saying carbs. So I'm like, huh. So pull out one of my gels, 20 carbs. I'm like, oh, boy. That could explain why I'm having some of the issues I'm having on my long runs is I'm only consuming maybe 30 to 40 carbs. I'm getting the calories, but I'm not getting the carbs. And I thought, I might need to adjust something there. So I'm going to be adjusting my carb-specific intake as a result of this episode because I'm not getting anywhere near 90 an hour. That's definitely not happening. Even when, and the funny thing was, the gels I'm using are 100 calories. And when I use gummy bears, they did talk about nerd clusters as well. But when I use like a candy, even a serving size of those only puts me at like 20 to 25 carbs. And I'm doing that like once to once and a half an hour. So it's like, oh, I'm not so much under fueling in terms of calories, but I might be under fueling in terms of carbs. So I am taking a look at that aspect of my long run specifically. And I'm going to try to adjust to see if I see a change in that. Really great episode on fueling in general. And something that she said that kind of was confirmation for me. It wasn't like, oh, I didn't know that. But it's something that I've battled with because I got into running last year. I think March 16th is when I've been at this for a year now. So I'm still not at a year. But last year when I started, I was just trying to lose weight. I was trying to burn. It was calories in, calories out. So, 3 miles, there's a couple hundred calories. 5 miles, there's a couple hundred calories. So it was all about calories. And when I got onto this racing side of it, it became pretty obvious to me that you have to either choose to lose weight or choose to train for a race. Because if you have any pace goals whatsoever, you have to have fuel. And you have to have fuel in the tank. And fuel in the tank kind of looks like weight. And not a lot of weight, but it looks like weight. And one thing that she said was, if you're losing weight while you're training for a marathon or a half marathon, not only are you underfueling for sure, but she said you're probably headed towards an injury. And I can relate to all of that, because last year when I was increasing my runs and trying to lose weight, I was having knee trouble, I was having hip pain, I was struggling with all these things. And when you're not fueling your body properly, you're not going to get the result that you're hoping for. You're just not. And you're going to wear your body down, and your body's going to use what it has available to fuel those runs. And it's part of why I think my 16-mile run last week went so well, despite the crash out that I had with the cold, is because I did fuel much better in terms of like very consistently. I slowed down. I hydrated well as well. And I made sure to slow down, take the gel, really committed to getting it when I felt, not when I was supposed to take it, but when I felt like I needed it. And now, having listened to this episode on fueling from the Buffalo Marathon podcast, I'm like, oh, I need to adjust all this. So probably on this next run that I'm going to do, maybe in a couple hours if this rain chilled out, I'm probably going to try to double my intake on the gels, definitely the carb side, maybe triple it. Because if I'm at 20 per hour, I don't know. We'll see. I'm thinking about getting some type of a drink that has carbs in it as well. But all that to say, the Buffalo Marathon podcast, really good with that specific guest. I'm looking forward to their future episodes. If it's something that's interesting that shocks me, like, oh, I didn't know that, we'll bring them up again in the future. But for the time being, check them out, especially if you're a runner. It's good podcast. And it's based on the fact that people are training for this marathon and giving them tips. So I really like that aspect of it too. If you're new to running, and you're thinking about training for a marathon, this is, I think they started, I don't know if they're doing it once every 2 weeks or what, but you're probably going to end up with 10 to 15 episodes there. So if you have like a 10-week training block or a 15-week training block, coming back and listening to these, regardless of what marathon you're training for, is probably going to be pretty valuable information across the board, especially if you're new at this. All right, I think it was last week or the week before, I forgot all about the quote of the week. And this week, I haven't even been looking at my calendar, because I haven't been. So the calendar has these little spots at the bottom to write how many miles you ran. So the bottom corner. And I had one. I had just pulled all these off. I didn't even write it in. Oh, let's see. I'm going to pick one here. I like that one. That's a good one. This was actually for Thursday, March 5th. But it says, focus on what lights the fire inside of you. I like that. I like that a lot. We'll hold that up to the camera. Focus on what lights the fire inside of you. So sometimes you have to cut some things out of your life that you're kind of committed to. Like maybe you signed up for it and you're not interested in it anymore. And you got to commit to the things that get you excited. And I'll tell you, this week's been a roller coaster with this cold. I've had a lot of moments where I asked myself genuinely, why am I running? I have this week-long schedule. Week-long? What am I talking about? I have this year-long schedule to run all these races. I've added to it since I made the schedule. I shared it a couple weeks ago on screen. And I had some genuine moments, even with this podcast and with the writing, where I was like, how much of this do I, when you're sick, you're just worn out, you're dragging, and you're just like, why do I do any of this stuff? Like, I don't have to do any of this stuff. Thankfully, I was ahead on the Substack. So, missing a week, no big deal there. I did question whether or not I was going to do this podcast because my head has just been in such a fog. And maybe it's a good thing that it was raining, because it's funny. I'm at an hour and 10 minutes right now. I was actually thinking, well, we'll make it a quick one. Well, we're back over an hour again. So, but the quote is, focus on what lights your fire, what gets you excited. Try to remember why you're doing the things that you're doing. And if the reason you're doing it isn't because you get something out of it in terms of like excitement or motivation or joy, then maybe it needs to go. But focus on those things that get you excited, that make you happy, and do those things. So that's our quote of the week. Let's go ahead and close things out. Obviously, thanks for listening to the Uncredible Podcast. We're getting close to 10 episodes in the bank now. This is technically episode 9, even though it's episode 08. The first episode was 00. Hopefully, I don't know how this one's going to turn out, but hopefully this camera I've got sorted out. Last week, if you looked at this camera specifically, I tried using my new phone, my Pixel 9, and I got some weird washout. It just turned me completely washed out. So what I've done for today's episode is I went to an even older phone. That is a, what is that phone? It's a Motorola something, Z3, I think it is, Motorola Z3 that I had laying around. So I pulled it out, and I actually noticed that the camera was putting out a pretty decent video. So I killed the lights behind me so that white wall behind me isn't so bright. In the future, I'm hoping to put something on that wall, but for the time being, we're just filming it like this. But as always, thanks for listening to the podcast. I appreciate it. Remember to like, subscribe, get on the Substack at uncredible.me. When you subscribe, like I said at the beginning, you'll get these episodes, podcast, articles, all that will go directly into your inbox, more than likely for the whole year. What I'm thinking about doing next year is starting to lock out the old articles so that only people who are subscribers in terms of like a monthly subscription, like $3 is what I'm thinking. Actually, no, it'd have to be $5 because I think Substack won't let me go down to $3. When we get to that point, locking some of the older content out so that the full library is only accessible to people who are subscribed. But for right now, it's free. You'll get them in your email, and you can, if you don't want it in your email, but you still want to subscribe, you can turn off the email and just download the Substack app, and it'll just show up in your app. So that works too. Like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify if you use either of those platforms. No subscription there. You just click follow or like. I'm not sure what it is on. I think it's follow on Spotify, and I think it's a heart. I don't know. But, when you do those things, it bumps us up in the algorithm. So hook us up that way. A reminder, Uncredible merch. Check out merch.uncredible.me. And as promised, there is a podcast shirt now available, or a podcast logo. You can get a sticker, a shirt, a whole bunch of products. And I also uploaded 2 new items. I'm not sure how I feel about them. I want to order them myself at some point and see how they turn out, and then maybe push them a little heavier. If you're brave, go ahead and jump in there and get one. But they are super Uncredible shirts. And so I basically took kind of the general idea of the Superman logo, and I turned it into like a female version and a male version so that you can have fathers and mothers. And we got Mother's Day, Father's Day coming up. And the idea is, if you know somebody who is really just an Uncredible mother or an Uncredible father, you can gift that to them. Or if you are brave enough to wear it yourself, you can wear it yourself. I don't know how those shirts are going to come out yet, so I want to get one and wear it. I have not been disappointed in anything except for one shirt. It wasn't terrible. I still wear it. But I haven't been disappointed in any one of these athletic shirts that I've gotten, so I want to get one of them with this and see what color fits it. I'm hoping it works on black because I like to wear the color black, but it looks like a dark green is going to be best for that. But it's like a gold logo, and it's got UN instead of the letter S for the Superman side of it. So check that out, merch.uncredible.me. Like I said, we do have the podcast logo up there too if you want to get a sticker or something. All that supports the show. 10% of what you put in there, not including shipping, comes back to me at some point. I've never gotten anything out of it, but it's there. So check it out. Follow on Instagram if you are a social media person. Instagram's kind of where everything's going right now. Instagram. And if you have the Substack app, I'm trying to post the Instagram posts on Substack as well. So check out all those things. Again, thanks for listening. And hey, stay Uncredible.